Good afternoon, Real Life Radio listeners. This is Jennifer on your Community Connection Corner here on your Catholic station, Real Life Radio 1380 and 94.9 FM. Joined today by Becca Self of Food Chain.
Woo! It's nice to be here.
It's great to have you. Always fun to have you. And like I was telling you before I came, I was telling my husband, I'm going to talk to Food Chain. She's the one with the fish. And he's like, the fish? So tell us about what Food Chain does so people don't just have to rely on me going, she's the one with the fish.
Right. So Food Chain is a small startup nonprofit here in Lexington. We say our mission is to reconnect people with their food. So given our name and that little tagline, we have a lot to do with food. And we specifically are trying to use education and demonstration to show what's possible with indoor food production. So kind of a complicated jumble of words there, but essentially we are showing people and demonstrating how to grow food indoors in the heart of a city.
And that could, revolutionize the way we do food.
Basically. Absolutely. And also trying to do that in a way that really stewards our resources well. So we don't want to waste a lot. We want to be really mindful of our consumption. So we say, we want to be as closed loop as possible by being in the heart of a city. We have a lot of waste streams that we can use as inputs for ourselves. And also just trying to do it in an engaging way. So to do that, we grow fish and plants. So kind of unexpected. So we get a little bit of a shock value there, which is fun.
You're growing fish and plants indoors.
We are.
In the middle of Lexington.
In the middle of Lexington, absolutely.
So how on earth does that work?
Yes. So the whole system is called aquaponics, fancy technical term for essentially what nature does automatically, where we use fish and their natural waste to actually serve as the fertilizer for the plants that we grow. And then those plants serve as the natural filter to clean the water to go back to the fish. So it's one cycle. The water is the loop that connects that whole piece. And then we get, from a food perspective, we get fresh tilapia, which is the fish that we grow, and lettuces and herbs and microgreens every single week of the year.
And tilapia, that's some good stuff. I mean, that's personally one of my favorite fish.
It's the fourth most consumed fish in the United States now, and it's rising. It's one of the most popularly consumed fish across the globe. Wow. It grows very quickly. It's very sustainable. You don't have any of the same contaminant problems that sometimes people worry about of kind of those big ocean fish, mercury contamination pieces. And it does really well in our system. So it's kind of a slam dunk in that respect.
What's the basic, lifespan of a tilapia or start to...
Yeah. So in our system, we stock our system with about a 4-month-old tilapia, which is about a 4-inch long little fingerling is what they're called in the industry.
Oh, cute.
And 6 months later, that fish is already about 1.25 pounds. So we harvest them after about 6 months in our system, but that's about a 10-month-old tilapia. So one of the fastest protein converting animals on the planet.
Wow.
Yeah.
Now, I know you guys have been working on getting baby fish hatched in your facility.
Exactly.
How is that going?
That is going really well. We are very, very excited. That's been a project that we've started this year. And we just had, about 2 weeks ago, our very first babies that were born on site. So it's really, really exciting. It's amazing to see how teeny tiny they are. That makes sense, but it's remarkable to see it actually take place. And so now we actually have our own hatchery where that happens, as well as a new nursery. So those little tiny fry is what they're called. They then move into the nursery to grow up to that 4-month stage that I was talking about, and then they graduate into our aquaponic system. So the exciting thing for us is that in our 3,000 square foot space, we'll be able to take fish from eggs all the way to harvest. And then right next door to us is where Smithtown Seafood is located. So they will then go to serve people for lunch and dinner.
That's just amazing.
Yeah, it's fun.
Because you guys are located in the Breadbox, in the old bread factory, and all of a sudden here's, West 6 Brewing, and then here's Food Chain and the Smithtown Seafood and the Plantery and all these things happening right there in an old bread factory, which is not where... I go, oh, let's grow fish.
Right. No, we certainly love the location that we're fortunate enough to be in. When we first settled on that location about 2 years ago, we certainly loved the connective symbionts of the fact that it was a former food facility and now we were kind of taking it into the future. So there's a lot of symbiotic relationship there.
Yeah.
And then the fact that we could have these relationships with the other tenants in the building. So we work very closely with West 6 Brewing, their waste product of spent grain. We've got lots of different plans for, including using it to create our own fish feed for our tilapia. And then clearly, with having Smithtown Seafood, with a door that connects our farm into their kitchen, they're the only buyer of our product right now. So it works so well. Everybody benefits from working together. So just in the same way, honestly, that our fish and our plants work together, we can model that same relationship between the brewery as well as the restaurant, and then so many of the other tenants in the building. It's a really exciting time to be down at the Breadbox for sure.
That's exciting.
Yeah.
And where's the Breadbox located for people who go, okay, they talk about what?
Sure. So it is at the intersection between Jefferson Street and West 6th Street. So Jefferson Street essentially dead ends into the Breadbox building. But most people tend to come up West 6th Street, and then you can't miss it. It's got all these big West 6th brewery signs on it.
And then there's Food Chain.
So one of the unusual things about Food Chain, sometimes people have a hard time finding us. We actually, considering the fact that we are growing plants, we don't have a single window into our space. So it's you have to know where you're going to find Food Chain. But if you find Smithtown Seafood, they've got a bunch of fish on their windows right on 6th Street. And we're right behind Smithtown. So we, believe it or not, we actually intentionally chose that interior space of the building. One of the few drawbacks of the fact that we're growing tilapia is that they are tropical, so they need a very warm environment. So we wanted to have complete control of our space. So even though it would be great from a visual standpoint to have windows, that would fluctuate our temperature a lot, and we wanted to have a little bit more of a controlled environment. So we intentionally chose that heart of the building, but sometimes it makes it hard for people to find us.
So then how do your light source and your heat source, if you don't have windows, where's this natural light to feed your plants coming from?
Yeah, so that was probably, when we were designing our aquaponic system, that was the scariest piece of the whole thing. If you ask 10 lighting experts about indoor grow lights, you get 11 different recommendations. And they're expensive. It was a major financial investment. But we've been really pleased with it. We've had our lights. We chose what's called in the industry an induction grow light. It uses electromagnetism to heat up the fluorescent gas as opposed to a traditional electrode. And all that really means is that we use about half of the amount of electricity, so they're really energy efficient.
Well, that's a good thing if you're doing as big as
for sure. It's a good thing from an environmental standpoint, and it's a good thing from an economic standpoint.
Yes.
And they're warranted for 10 years, so they last a really long time. And they give a full spectrum light. So essentially the same quality of light that the sun gives, so our plants won't lack for any spectrum. And then we took it a step further. We couldn't afford as many of these lights, since they are so expensive, as the manufacturer recommended.
Of course.
And so we decided to build, probably the most unique piece about Food Chain's indoor system is they're all on movers, our lights are. So we've got 24 lights, and those lights are constantly moving 4 feet down our beds and 4 feet back up. And that gave us, from a financial standpoint, a lot of savings because we could cover more area with a single light fixture. But it also gave the plants better light because plants have evolved to grow with a moving light source known as the sun.
What do you know?
Yeah, exactly. And now they don't have to stretch towards a static light. So it works out pretty well.
Yeah, I wouldn't have. Yes, it moves.
Yes.
The sun moves.
Yes.
That makes sense.
Exactly. And if you've ever grown a plant in a windowsill, I'm sure you've noticed that those plants are pretty unique, that they can actually gear their growth towards the window or wherever the sun is. But the challenge with that is that takes energy. So by having those plants grow under a moving light source, they can use their energy just to get bigger, not in a way to have to actually grow towards that light.
So what's your background, Becca? How did you even get around to do, hey, when I grow up, I'm going to form an aquaponics? Probably not.
Yeah, this has been my life's dream. That's a little tongue-in-cheek. My background is very, very crooked. I have a strong science background. So I'm a native Lexingtonian. I grew up downtown. I went to the math and science program out of Dunbar, then went on to MIT. So I have a lot of science in my background. My degree is actually in architecture. And while that often surprises people, but honestly, that kind of appreciation of spaces and systems thinking that I learned in architecture school, I think actually has had a lot to do with how food chain has kind of evolved. But I actually went straight from college right into teaching. So my real background is in education. I taught science in the classroom for 7 years before segueing into the nonprofit world. As if you couldn't tell, I like to talk. I like to teach people. I find that really, really engaging. And I think my biggest qualification for food chain is I like to eat.
Hey!
So I like to eat good food. So fresh food, wholesome food, all of those great things. And I think everybody should have access to that. So
yeah, absolutely.
That's really a lot of it.
Because you really don't find, in the city especially, and where you guys are downtown, you're not going to find fresh produce.
No.
You're not going to find fresh fish, especially.
Yeah, in fact, food chain, the Breadbox itself is right in the middle of what the USDA terms a food desert. So we actually have both a population that resides around us that has pretty low socioeconomic means, overlaid with a far distance away from a grocery store, which means most of the people who live in that area have to depend on fast food, convenience food, gas stations to meet their daily food needs. And we all know what the outcomes of that are, of this obesity epidemic and, calorie laden but nutritionally starved.
Right.
So not only is there an educational need, but there's just a nutritional need.
Fantastic. Well, when we come back from the break, we will talk more about food chain and how people can get involved here on your Community Connection Corner on your Catholic station, Real Life Radio 1380 and 94.9 FM, WMJR, Nicholasville, Lexington.